Greetings and welcome to Everybody's Business, the podcast from the National Entrepreneur Center. I'm your host, Jerry Ross. I am president of the National Entrepreneur Center. And on this episode, we love getting up in everybody's business, including yours. So if you have a question for us that you'd like us to address either by email or maybe online, give us an email at hello@nationalec.org. Give us your question and we'll do our best to address that question, and you might even hear it on an episode. With me here today in studio is the lovely and talented Rachel Madsen.
Thank you, Jerry. That was nice.
Uncharacteristically nice, right?
No, that's not true.
Well, have you had your coffee?
Probably too much, but yeah.
Yeah, but not the espresso that I've been hearing about.
Yeah.
How did the espressos come about?
Well, I actually got an espresso machine for Christmas, and I quickly learned how to overdo it.
You mean too much foam or too much cream?
Oh no, just doing it straight. I was trying to be a trooper.
You were powered by caffeine.
Yeah. I felt I overdid it and I could not sleep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I officially knew what wired meant.
It brought a new understanding of
new
caffeine.
understanding.
Well, I have to have my coffee in the morning, but you're right. There's a point that I go, that's probably enough.
Mm-hmm. You got to dilute yourself. You got to take a step back.
Exactly. I spent a little bit this morning, longer than I had anticipated, on my Facebook page.
Oh, yeah?
And what I found was they are really good at giving you this picture or this headline that just draws you in. And so I went down the rabbit hole.
Hashtag algorithms at work.
Exactly. They know who I am.
Yeah, they do.
And they know what I like. And so I went down the rabbit hole and everything that popped up was just more interesting than the last thing. And they had me for quite a while. And so I looked up and thought, gosh, I'm going to be late if I don't get going. But that goes to show you that if you know who your target market is, and you market directly to them, you can grab them and keep their attention.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Shopping. My debit card is a shame to me.
Exactly. I've heard that if you put it in a pan in water and you put it in the freezer, and so when you want to use it, you have to take it out and wait for it to thaw out. So that gives you time to rethink your decision.
I think the problem now, though, is that you can save your cards to your computer.
Or your phone. I can't freeze my phone. Well, I was going to say, or the card is so hot, the ice melts very quickly.
It was a really good thought, though.
I'm trying to help you. The other good side of technology that we have today is that I found myself, we went out to shop for a TV. Mm-hmm. And I found myself in the showroom on my phone researching the customer reviews of those TVs, the ratings from the different rating agencies.
Oh, I love ratings.
Yes.
Ratings are so important.
Yes. And so on one hand, the technology, draws me in and keeps me there. But on the other hand, I've been much better at using it to do the research that I need on the product reliability and durability and those kind of things. So research, it works both ways.
Oh, it does. It does.
I can do my research on you, but they're doing research on me too. All my buying habits. I've got to tell you another story. After I wrote my book, Business Shorts, and I was going online to see if it had listed on Amazon yet, and it hadn't uploaded yet. And so I kept testing and going to see, when is it going to finally make it to the internet so I could say, I'm out there. It's there. And so I finally found it and said, okay, now it's out there. Well, the next day when I opened my computer, do you know what popped up on my screen as something I might be interested in? The book Business Shorts by Jerry Ross. And I said to my wife, I said to my wife, oh my gosh, my book pod. She said, well, you only Googled it 400 times yesterday. They know you're interested. And so it's that kind of research that can be done today very quickly, very effectively, and very economically.
Yeah. Know how it works for you.
You betcha.
That's very important.
You betcha. Who's our guest?
We have Tom Marin, and he is from MarketCues.
MarketCues, a market research company that helps you identify your target market. Should be an interesting conversation with Mr. Marin.
I think so.
I'm looking forward to it. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Jerry Ross coming to you from the National Entrepreneur Center. I'm coming to you from my home office because our staff as well is working remotely. But we're working remotely to serve the small businesses in Central Florida. If you have a need, if you want to get connected, there are many ways to do that with the National Entrepreneur Center. So we are still answering your calls. We are still answering your email. In fact, we've been pretty busy these last few months, even working remotely to launch the new online learning platform in partnership with the Lonely Entrepreneur out of New York City, who had about 300 learning modules of content readily available. And we've made a partnership to make that available to you for free while you're working remote. So while you may be home working alone, you don't have to be alone, because the National Entrepreneur Center and our 14 resident organizations have one mission, and that's to help you grow your business. And we're back. You're listening to Everybody's Business, the podcast from the National Entrepreneur Center out of Orlando, Florida. I'm Jerry Ross, your host here as president of the National Entrepreneur Center. And this podcast is designed with you in mind. The businesses out there, entrepreneurs, would-be entrepreneurs that are looking for information on how to do this thing called entrepreneurship. I'd like to shout out to our sponsor, State Farm Insurance. We wouldn't be able to do these podcasts and offer them to you for free without our sponsors. And so we appreciate all of our sponsors, including our newest one, State Farm Insurance. We have a treat for you today. We are going to be interviewing Tom Marin of MarketCues. Tom was born in Chicago, Illinois. He's been married for 45 years, has 3 grown children and 3 grandchildren. He loves espresso, but cold. And so we're going to get to that a little bit later. There's something just not right about that. He graduated from Northern Illinois University with a bachelor's in education and social science. He's worked for marketing, advertising, and communication companies most of his life. He founded a Chicago Loop marketing agency in '81, and he sold it after being in business for 14 years. He's worked as a partner in other agencies, and he founded MarketCues in 2005 and built Smart Plan 360 platform, which is designed for organizational development and second stage companies that are growing. He wrote his first book, Rethink, on smart organizational and leadership strategies, and he conducts Rethink workshops all over the country. Please welcome my friend, Tom Marin. How you doing this morning, Tom?
Good, Jerry. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. We hadn't caught up for a while. I'd lost track since you moved to North Carolina.
Yeah.
So how was that move, and how do you like North Carolina?
Well, it's been fantastic. Nothing against Florida, but as my wife once referred to as like living in a gigantic 7-Eleven because she didn't like hot. She doesn't like sand. So I said, why did we move here? Anyway, so it seemed like a good idea at the time.
And I am glad you did, because that's how we connected as client and as a marketing company that you've helped the National Entrepreneur Center many times. So let's talk about what MarketCues does and how you got into doing that.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned at the top, I had a marketing firm in Chicago, and for many years, and I observed how many companies had great products, but yet really struggled throughout their entire life of the business. And it was because they did not know how to connect with their customers. They just assumed so much of their customers, and without any testing, without any research. And so when I started MarketCues, I wanted to bring the market and the cues of the market together for clients, so that help them understand. And that's the basis of MarketCues, is bringing customers to companies that they need, obviously, to survive. And
So,
the smart plan.
So a lot of entrepreneurs say, I have this great idea, and then they go down that path of what's in their head, and then they find out that that may be a great idea, service or product, but if people aren't willing to buy it, it doesn't go anywhere.
That's exactly right. I mean, most companies that fail, and it's a pretty of startups, and it's a pretty high percentage, unfortunately, 60, 70% over the life of that startup. They do have good products. That isn't the problem. They just don't have customers to buy the products. That's why they go out of business. It's not because they're not prepared to serve somebody. It's because they haven't been able to connect with enough customers to get cash flow going, which is so critical in that first stage.
And so how do companies do that? How do they find out if it is a good idea, if there will be a market for what it is that they want to produce, and what people might be willing to pay? Because there may be people that say, sure, I'll buy it, but if they're not buying it at a price that you can make a profit, that's just as bad.
Yeah, if there's one key in a startup after the founder has envisioned, he or she has envisioned what the product is going to be and how it's all going to be wonderful. And of course, all founders think their products are great.
Naturally.
They should go out and talk to 100 different potential customers. It's very specifically about what it is they're going to offer before they even get anything settled, just to test that idea out. And most of the time when we work with startups, what they envisioned they were going to start selling is not what they end up selling, because what a customer really needs is different.
Sure. And so just because somebody can bake cookies and everyone says, I love the cookies you bake and can you bake me more and all of that, that's not enough, because I think a lot of times people are asking people about their idea that love them and they want them to succeed. And so they tell them, yes, get into the cookie business. And so I always recommend that they say, okay, if you love my cookies, give me $12 and I'll give you a couple of dozen. And they go, ooh, now that money's involved, that might be a different story.
Yeah, and that's a very good way to test the veracity of an idea, is to ask somebody to buy it. And, if you hear the words, well, I think this is a great product, and I'm sure there's a market for it, it's just not for me. And you hear that 50 times in a row, then you need to the entrepreneur needs to really explore other alternatives, find out what they really do want to buy.
So what I'm hearing is that MarketCues will help companies identify who their target market is, and how big that market is, which would give you the information you need to say, how much do I invest of my lifelong savings?
Right. The range of clients that we have are startup to scale up. So if they're just starting, we can help them do that. If they're already established and, they're doing a certain amount of business and they want to get to 50 million as an example, then we can help them get there as well. So we work for a very wide range of companies. So
I see here that you wrote the book Rethink and launched the Rethink seminars. Where does that fit in?
Well, Rethink was a capsulation of all of the types of consulting and coaching that we had been doing for the last probably 7 or 10 years. And we needed a volume that would say that we could give to a client and say, here, read this book, and you'll see the overview of what it is we believe. There's 4 drivers. And so that's why the 4 drivers of growth are why we wrote it, is so that an entrepreneur could actually, find out what if he's filling those requirements.
Well, can you share those 4 drivers of growth, or is that super secret?
No, it's not secret.
We're in the club. I got the ring.
Yeah, there's 4 drivers, as I said. Alignment is the number one, vertically throughout the organization and horizontally to the customer, the most important foundation. Are you aligned? Are you doing what's most important to the client right now? Not what's most important to you, but are you doing what's most important to the client? The second is integration. Have you, for a larger company, is everybody in your organization able to speak this as well as you can? because they're the ones who are on the front line. And often the founder holds things a little bit too close to the chest and doesn't let employees know enough.
Very true.
The third driver is awareness. Have you communicated that messaging effectively with your target market segments? And, most companies don't have one market segment. They have a multiplicity of segments. And that's why it's really important to be aligned and have an integrated viewpoint and be able to communicate that different messaging to the very specific market segments. And then if you do those three, then that leads to relevance. And relevance is not something, let's put it in the positive. Relevance is something you have to earn. It happens as a result of the first three things being done well. And when you connect all four of those drivers, that's what's key. That's what produces growth for an organization.
Wow. Well, that was an MBA right there and worth it. And that's why you listen to Everybody's Business. Tom, we're going to come back and talk about your entrepreneurial journey, but we need to take a break right now. So we'll be right back.
The National Entrepreneur Center has made it easy for you to learn business principles from anywhere at any time with NEC Online. As a supplement to all the great resources at the National Entrepreneur Center, you now have free access to over 300 learning modules that you can access at any time. Thanks to the generous sponsorship of Wells Fargo and our partnership with The Lonely Entrepreneur, you can access this powerful online learning platform for free. Learn on your own time and at your own pace. Access product reviews and participate in weekly group coaching opportunities. Right now, the only thing missing is you. So check out our online learning platform today at nationalec.org. That's nationalec.org. Did I mention it's free?
And we're back. You're listening to Everybody's Business, a podcast from the National Entrepreneur Center. I'm your host, Jerry Ross, and today we're talking with Tom Marin, president of MarketCues, and we're getting an MBA in business here. But Tom, what I want to do is talk about your entrepreneurial journey. How did you get started? What gave you the motivation to start up, and how difficult was it?
Okay, well, if we go back, after I got out of school, I taught middle school and high school for 3 years. So if you actually follow my career through the thing, you'll notice that there isn't a lot of. I'd love to say I planned it all. I didn't. It was just one thing after the next.
Well, the reason I laugh is I think now you just fed the pipeline of marketers of the future. I'm sure you inspired all of those kids to go into marketing of some sort. So where'd you go from there?
So I worked for a gentleman who owned a medium-sized communications firm in Chicago, Tom Adams Communications. I worked there 5 years. I was his understudy. I started there as his understudy, and I ended up as his VP, one of the VPs. And I learned an enormous amount from Tom. He was very good with clients. He understood how to communicate. He had worked at Barnum and Bailey Circus as an actual professional clown and juggler, and he could amuse people. He was just the most entertaining, and he was very fair and balanced. He sold his firm to a much larger firm, Bozell, which was in Boston at the time. And at that moment, he said, "Tom, now's your moment." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Why don't you go start your own firm? I'll help you." And he did. I got a huge help from him. He even helped me pick out the building. We were at 1 East Wacker Drive. I said, "Hey, can you co-sign for the lease?" He went, "No."
I don't like you that much.
Nice try, but I think it ought to be you on the line, not me.
But wow, that's another example of a mentor that looks out for someone that's working for them, but also the ability of you to recognize that opportunity to learn from your boss and from people that had been around.
Yeah, I could not. I owe him a debt forever. He was really invaluable.
So you started your own firm?
Yes. So I'm a sage old 27-year-old at 1 East Wacker Drive with no clients.
President, CEO, chairman of the board.
Yeah, exactly.
And receptionist and janitor.
The truth is, you actually, if you were in the quote reception area, and there were more than two people there, one of us had to turn sideways to get through the hallway. It was incredibly small, 323 square feet, as I remember it. But anyway, we did get, exactly. We did get several clients up front, which was remarkable. It was 1981. It was double-digit MasterCard and Visa rates at the time. And so people were looking for deals. And so we could care less what I sold. If they wanted me to, sell hot dogs and hamburgers, I would have done it.
Do juggling and professional clowning.
But we did get two large clients, and that carried us through until we could more establish ourselves. Great.
Was that scary?
Yes, except the thing is, when I look back on this, I honestly really wasn't scared. And it was my naivete. Like, it never really dawned on me that I might not make it. And it's not because I had a super level of confidence. It just never occurred to me. I just thought, well, I watched Tom do it. He can do it. I can do it too. And, so it was just this crazy, silly, not quite being in touch, which was not, in some ways it was good because I didn't worry that much. In other ways, it wasn't too good. It was a little naive.
And I think every entrepreneur has to have a little bit of that I do need to consider what may happen if it doesn't work, but that's not going to happen. And so sometimes that's what takes that drive and perseverance to make it work. Was there a point in that endeavor where you said, you stopped and said, hey, this is growing bigger than I imagined. This is taking off in a way that I really hadn't planned?
Yeah. Yes, there was that moment. And it was when we got the call from Fujifilm USA, who had a consumer division and they had a professional business division. And the professional business division was interviewing many different agencies. My name was put into rotation by a president, actually, of a media company with a very strong, warm recommendation. And we ended up getting that business in a really short span of time. And it changed everything because that was a national client. Everybody knew who they were. The fact that they had awarded it to us, frankly, was not even, we were competing against, 50-year-old, $100 million ad agencies that specialized in that industry. So it was, to be blunt, it was pretty absurd that they did it, but they liked what we presented them. That was the key. And we did know their marketplace because of my background. We knew their market. My dad was in the printing business and the marketing ad business for his whole life. And so I had apprenticed at all these different shops that my dad would force me to get part-time jobs in the summer.
Sure.
And then in his days, they worked on Saturday. It was a 6-day week. And so he would bring me down on Saturday and he would put me to work. I mean, I wasn't there playing with the little drawing. I was actually doing work for them. And I did that for a long time. And so I knew the business a little bit better than a guy who was an account exec or a VP, in a big agency.
Well, and that goes back to that alignment where what the client needs. And when you do that David and Goliath story can come true because they hear your understanding and hearing their needs, not just presenting what you've presented 100 times before.
Exactly true.
Was there any one piece of advice that you got when you started up that made a difference?
Yes. That was actually my dad who sent me around to different CEOs who own companies, 3 different guys. And one in particular told me, don't ever be scared to hire somebody who's a lot smarter than you are. Don't ever be intimidated by that. Always remember, you're the owner. They're working for you, number one. And number two, if they're that smart, they'll help you get ahead. So that's not a bad thing.
Sure.
It doesn't matter where the idea comes from. It's that the idea comes into the room. That's what you need. So don't be scared to hire somebody who's older, who has a lot more experience than you, or maybe is really different than you are. Be very open in your hiring. I didn't hire anybody, for a year. Actually, I had a part-time assistant for the first year and a semi-full-time the second year. But then we did start hiring people, and I used that rule. I had people who, frankly, are just exceptional people that I would give opportunities to for that reason.
And I've had similar advice where it said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I try to surround myself with people who are different and have great ideas. And that's always been something that has been beneficial to me. What's one advice or piece of advice that you would give to an entrepreneur today? I mean, we've been dealing with months of shutdown from the COVID-19 pandemic, and now as we're maybe seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, there's been those businesses that have survived. They've hung on. What piece of advice would you offer them today?
Well, without trying to harken back to the book, I really do advise that everybody. It doesn't matter if you've been in business for one day or 100 years. Everybody needs to rethink what they do, why they do it, and how they're going to do it. Because, if you don't know what business you're in and what business you're not in, and maybe it's more important to know what business you're not in than it is what business you are in. Can't be all things to all people. The biggest difference today to 30 years ago is that we have a multiplicity of segmentation. There are layers and layers of experts on all these different fields, all these different SIC codes. I mean, you can find an expert on, mushrooms. And it's so you really do need to know what it is you're going to do and what your client will want to pay for, which goes back to the top of this, talk, is just, you have to know what they're willing to pay for, because you're going to be very discouraged if you just go out there without any research, going out blind.
I have a little card in my office. It says, "Why you? So what? Who cares?" And so
that's great.
And so I use that myself to say, why would someone want to come to the National Entrepreneur Center? So what? What is it going to do for them? And then who would care about that? And so that really helps us keep our focus. Tom, we're going to take a break and come back in a minute, but I'd like to talk about your life journey and any ideas and thoughts you have on recovering from COVID. So we'll be right back right after this.
The National Entrepreneur Center in Orlando, Florida has been around since 2003 and today is home to 14 business support organizations who have a single mission: to help you grow your business. Through free business coaching, low-cost training, and valuable business connections, these 14 business support organizations assist thousands of entrepreneurs each year in starting, growing, and scaling their businesses. So why not visit the website at nationalec.org today, or give us a call at 407-420-4848 to discover how you might take your business to the next level. And by the way, the National Entrepreneur Center is funded entirely through local sponsors, which include Florida Blue, Fifth Third Bank, the Orlando Magic, and Seacoast Bank, just to name a few. So let's get connected today and get growing. Check out our website at nationalec.org.
We're back and we're talking with Tom Marin, president of MarketCues, a market company that can help from startup to scale up. Fascinating conversation, Tom, on marketing and your entrepreneurial journey. I want to touch briefly on COVID and how that might have affected you and your company, or you personally. What do you think about the whole COVID shutdown and now that we're looking toward moving forward? How does a company market around that?
So it has affected our company dramatically, because much of what we used to do would be done in person, either on a coaching or consulting basis. We would go places, we would fly places to clients, all that changed overnight. In March 2019, we said, okay, from now on, no flights, and we're going to stay in. The good news for us was we had already been in the process of moving the company toward an all virtual platform. Our software was already done, so it does not require anybody to be anywhere. You can do it all electronically and digitally. So that piece of the puzzle was very much taken care of. All of the workshops had been committed to PowerPoint and other material, but it needed to be converted for a online presentation. So we condensed things. We have probably 40 different exercises now that work in a co-joined way with our workshops, which are delivered also online.
So using technology was how you transitioned.
Yeah. And we were going in that direction anyway, but it dramatically sped it up.
So were there any surprises to you in moving the business to virtual, or your sessions and your seminars online? Any surprises in that?
In our case, I was surprised at how much how much openness there was to this. Because anybody who's been in business development knows it's very difficult to open doors sometimes with different types of clients. But because their need is so great, and because we had this ready-made package, I don't really like the fact that obviously we gained from this, but our business went up quite a bit in 2020 as a result of this, because so many companies needed precisely what it is we do to rethink their organizational strategy and their leadership problems and solutions.
Every business everywhere is rethinking how they do business. I think this time of being at home and having to engage technology has opened some new thinking about how business will be done. And I think a lot of that will be carried forward in the economy after we do open up and people feel comfortable coming out again. I think it's changed forever.
We've also noticed that clients are more willing to share with each other. Even competitors are more willing to share what their challenges are and to talk to each other. We have a cohort program on the West Coast that has 20 different individual companies in it. And it's just in the early stage of the development of it. But, I was a little bit hesitant to even propose on it, because I thought, well, these guys some of these are competitors to each other. And they said, no, it doesn't matter. We're all trying to help each other and all trying to help survive. And so, it allows them to be able to, participate in something that they don't have to pay for on a larger scale. We can bring it down on a seminar web level.
Sure. There's an efficiency of bringing more people together. But that was one of the surprises that I had, is the willingness of people, first of all, to accept the technology and say, I don't have to be face-to-face with someone to do business. I can do a Zoom call and get things accomplished. But also the willingness of people in an industry to say, we got to band together, work together, share best practices if any of us are going to survive. And so I think that will build a stronger base of those businesses that do survive. I think there's been a whole lot of struggling businesses that aren't going to make it. But I think as we do open up, there will be a new way to do business. And I think marketing and knowing your client and knowing that what you deliver is bringing value has taken the priority now. The delivery system has changed.
This is a little harsh, but the companies that did go out of business already were already in trouble. before COVID-19. What COVID-19 did was just kind of hurried up them out the door, like retail businesses that had brick and mortar, and we were unwilling to spend anything to investigate, online, to compete against to Amazon as an example,
Right.
those stores, those retail outlets that didn't have any idea or any interest in knowing, sort of like Blockbuster telling who was it? Netflix, because Netflix went to them first and said, hey, would you like us we'll be your streaming partner. And they rebuffed Netflix and told them they were crazy and that the whole thing would never work, that people go to stores, they get DVDs, and that's the way the business works. And so Netflix says, no, I don't think so. And so now there's, obviously what happened. So I think the companies that didn't have an inkling of what was going to be happening in their own marketplace are the ones who suffered the most.
I agree. And there's a certain amount of entrepreneurial dynamism that happens in every community where businesses pop up and maybe they weren't well funded, maybe they weren't well thought out. And then they close and that provides the fertile entrepreneurial capital to sprout the next business. And so I think there normally is a certain amount of entrepreneurial dynamism and people starting businesses and businesses closing. I think you're right that COVID, for those businesses that were unprepared, it just hurried them to the exit.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks for bringing me down here.
No, I'm sorry.
No, we're speaking truth. We're speaking reality here. So I appreciate that. But it is true. And here at the National Entrepreneur Center, we work with businesses in every stage. And there are some folks that are scared to come in because they are struggling. And yet sometimes it's how you manage the exit that can provide the foundation for your next business. And so it is part of that entrepreneurial cycle, but what people need to realize is that they are not alone. There is help and services out there. This pandemic has been unprecedented, but you can't go through this alone. Entrepreneurship is a team sport. It's not a solo sport. We're going to take a break. I'm sorry to jump out, but we need to recognize the sponsors who are the ones that make this happen. So we'll be right back, and we're going to talk about you and your life journey. So you better study your notes and go to school on where you came from and how you got here. We'll be right back. As we go through this year of the pandemic, many of us thought that would only be maybe a few weeks, maybe a month. But now that it's gone on for months, people are realizing that maybe we're not going to be doing business the way we used to. Maybe business has changed forever. Whole workforces have pivoted to working from home. Schools closed, businesses closed, live events canceled. COVID-19 has pretty much turned our daily lives upside down. Dealing with a global pandemic has also made us rethink how we do everything. Schooling our children to serving customers, it's difficult. Any kind of change is difficult. But when you add to that all the uncertainty that comes with an unpredictable virus, a virus that could be fatal, it's no wonder that folks are feeling a bit stressed these days. So if you are feeling stressed right now, it's okay. You're normal. What you need to know is that you're not alone. Most everybody today is feeling the stress of the situation. Maybe in different ways, maybe with different circumstances, but believe me, everyone has been affected. It's okay not to be okay right now. You are allowed to take time for you to regroup and to recharge. I think there are some aspects of what we've found from working remote that are good, that we've learned to use different technology. We've learned new ways to stay in contact with each other and with our clients. And I think even when things do get back to normal, whatever normal may be, that we'll find that some of these aspects of technology and video conferencing, online learning, all of those things will be carried forward into the new way of doing business. Remember, in times of chaos, there is always an opportunity. And we're back. You're listening to Everybody's Business, a podcast from the National Entrepreneur Center. Today, we're talking with Tom Marin, president of MarketCues. Tom, I want to talk about your life journey. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Homewood, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago.
Yeah, and for any of those listeners, I mentioned that when we started, so this is the test to see if you were able to answer that correctly. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I was quite young. I believe I was somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 years old. I wanted to be a carpenter.
Yeah.
Because I watched my dad. My dad loved woodworking, and so I would watch him do that. And so that was like my big career. I want to be like my dad. I want to be a carpenter. Boy, that's
Sure.
really cool. Want to get my hands on some of those power tools.
Exactly. And so are you able to fix things around the house now, or do you call a professional?
I'm kind of a 1-800 call the expert guy. My brother is the one who's actually quite gifted in that way. He can do anything, but not me.
Well, I'm really good at tearing stuff up. Putting it back is not my gift, and so I do the call the expert thing as well. What were your hobbies, interests?
Music was always a really big deal for me. My mom played the organ. I love my mom, but loved her, but she played it poorly, and I loved it. And so she said, "Well, why don't you just take the lessons then?" I was like 10 years old or something like that, and the teacher walked in our house. That was the days when people would actually go to their house to be trained.
Sure.
And the guy comes in and thinks it's my mom and says, "Finally, you're playing." And then he comes in and there's this 10-year-old kid sitting there. So, but anyway, I played the organ, the Hammond B3, in all the way through junior high, all the way up through high school, in rock bands.
No kidding.
That was my main thing. Was music.
Well, the organ is tough. I mean, you've got two different keyboards and you're playing with your feet. Pretty coordinated there. I can see why you could be a handyman. Yeah,
it's in the rock band, generally you don't play the bass pedals. You've got a bass player. So I don't want to take credit for anything. That's pretty tough to do, actually. If you see real jazz organists like Jimmy Smith, people like that, who can play 3 different things at the same time, that's a real professional. Okay. In your rock band, what was your jam? We played heavy rock, hard. Smoke on the Water? Like Santana stuff, that kind of stuff. Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. Soul Sacrifice, Evil Ways? Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, no, we played a pretty wide range. Okay, so did you play just in your garage or did you go out and play gigs and We had 3 places that we practiced because the parents would kick us out because we were too loud. So one of them was my garage. Another was a guy who moved our stuff around for us. We would play in his garage. And then we had a friend who had a large home. And when his parents weren't around, we would move the stuff in and into his basement. It's curious that 3 of the 4 band members became professionals that I played with. They are professional musicians. I'm the only one who didn't. I was the low man on the totem pole. So that should tell you something about my playing area. Well, but you have that past of being in a rock and roll band, and at that period of time, that was very cool. Yeah, it was actually, and surprisingly, we did extremely well. Honestly, we made more money than we probably should have. So. Well, because they pay up front, right? Mm-hmm. That's a good thing. Better. They actually paid a lot of money for a high school band. I mean, it was pretty amazing. Did you like school? No. Nope. No, not all the way through high school. I did not. I had a pretty tough whatever you want to call it, family life. And it wasn't super, and that's one of the reasons why I was so interested in music. Actually, it was my escape. But in college, I loved college. I really did love the learning of that. Yes. And that's kind of where you get the chance to go down the path that's interesting to you. And so that happens a lot. That happened a little bit to me, where I got to say,
I love to talk. I get in trouble for talking. And I went to college and they had a speech major where you can major in talking. And I thought, I know how to do this. I wouldn't have to study. So that happens. Tell me about family. Your kids are grown and off. You just recently, well, not so recently, moved to North Carolina. How did you handle that transition?
The transition from Florida to North Carolina.
Yeah.
It was a very easy transition. Our oldest daughter and her husband live here in Durham, and they invited us, to come for several years while we were still in Florida. And she became my oldest daughter became pregnant, and this large magnet over my house moved us into North Carolina rather quickly. Actually, not much space of time between
The
when we listed
the magnetic pull of grandchildren.
It was I mean, I don't want to say anything about my wife, but she's the driver of that for sure. And we were here literally within a month and a half time. And our house sold very quickly. So that was all very good.
That all helps. And sometimes the timing's just right. But it's also continuing to reach out and experience new things. And I think not only we go through that personally through our life, but our businesses go through that as well, where it comes time to kind of raise your head up and say, what's next? And what's the next challenge, even though it might be a little scary? Let me ask you a few final questions, and then we're going to get to some of the things that you like. If you could have a conversation with anybody in history, who would that be and what would you talk about?
Because of our political scene right now, I'd love to talk to somebody like George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, somebody who was so disconnected from today that would have a fresh new insight and maybe offer some advice to those people who are over us in government of all different types and shapes, because I'm old enough to remember what it was like, 30, 40 years ago and what it's like today. And it's very discouraging to see all this infighting back and forth and politicking for the sake of politicking and not really doing anything of the people's business, just trying to win the next fight. And so I'd love to talk to somebody like that who could maybe bring in some moral authority and set a new tone.
My mom used to say, we need statesmen and not politicians. And so I was having a discussion about that yesterday, about the fringes of the political spectrum. And when you believe that, there's 300 million people in the United States, if there's just 1% on either fringe, that's 3 million people on each end. And that's a lot of people. And that 1% on either end drives a lot of the discourse. And so if we can get back to having discourse that's civil and respectful, I think that we can get back to some of those things that you and I remember, that we used to be able to talk about tough issues and come to compromise to get things done. What keeps you up at night? What do you worry about? And
it's not really business that makes me worried. I'm kind of concerned for my kids and their kids. The world is a lot different today. And I suppose that every generation looks at their kids in that way and maybe has a concern about them. So maybe there's nothing that unusual about it. It's just, it's just a different world that I grew up in completely. I mean, Homewood, Illinois was like Mayberry of Illinois. It really was.
You had Goober and Gomer down at the filling station.
We did. I mean, fields. There was Isaac Walton Pond or Lake, if you want to call it that, where we fished and we stayed there all day. Our parents had no idea where we were. They didn't care. It was just a different atmosphere altogether. And there was never ever worry. The door would open and the neighbor would come in and borrow something literally out of our refrigerator or cupboard. My mom would do the same thing or send us over to do it.
Sure.
Today, 911, police would be there, somebody be in handcuffs, it's just a totally different environment that we're in.
Well, and it is. And back then, if there was a a car crash in San Diego, you didn't hear about it. There was a lot of things going on in the world, but it wasn't brought to you as if it was happening in your hometown. And so things have changed, and technology has brought a lot of good things, but it's also brought a lot of change, which we deal with. So let me talk about some really important things. I'd really like to talk about your preferences. And so what is your favorite color?
It's always been blue.
Blue, as in your shirt. That works. What's your favorite movie?
I really struggle with this question because I love movies. I watch them all the time.
Yeah.
One of my favorite all-time movies is Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah.
I also happen to like, which, when it's on, my wife finds something else to do. Gladiator. I just think that was an epic Russell Crowe film.
I have watched that many times myself.
Yeah.
Coffee or tea drinker?
Oh, definitely coffee.
Introvert or extrovert?
When I was young, I was more extroverted. As I've gotten older, I'm more introverted, truly. If I had the choice between going to a real big something with a lot of people or going with one or two other people somewhere, I would take the one or two people today. That was not the case when I was younger. So I have changed, I think, over time.
Sure. What's your favorite meal?
That's also a difficult question. Probably steak would be my favorite if I had to choose one. Yeah.
I'm a spaghetti man. I could have spaghetti 3 times a day and it would be fine. Do you have a favorite cartoon character?
Well, Superman was always one. And, I also really liked the series when I was a kid, Mighty Mouse. I don't know if you remember Mighty Mouse. I liked Mighty Mouse.
Here I come to save the day.
Yeah.
It's crazy that I can't remember what I had for dinner yesterday, but I can remember Mighty Mouse's song from how many years ago?
Yeah.
Favorite time of year? Favorite season?
Probably Christmas time, because that's the time when all the family comes back together again. This year we were Zooming with everybody, but, in times past, we have people come back to our house and, have a great time.
What do you do when you're not working?
I love photography.
Yeah.
That's one of the benefits of being here in North Carolina, because all sorts of forests, landscapes, lakes, very nice outdoor scenes. I love landscape photography, and I have a really strong interest in that photography. I still play music, in the time, and I like to read. And I like to bike. I have a bicycle that I like to bike, and so those sort of things that are just relaxing, different than anything else that you do in your day-to-day business.
Sure. It's interesting that you say bicycle. Because a lot of things today, you're biking, but you're not moving anywhere. You're just biking. Would you rather give a speech or plan the event?
Probably plan the event.
Yeah, but you're such a good speaker.
Well,
we've invited you here several times, and you always bring it. You bring down the house. So as you're planning the events of the future, don't quit speaking, and we're going to bring you here back to the National Entrepreneur Center. Last question. I know the pressure's been tough. Beer or wine?
Beer.
Beer?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Wine is nice. I like wine too, but beer is just easier.
Not to exclude any alcoholic beverages, but if I had my privilege. So knowing that, next time you're in the Orlando area, we'd love to connect with you, and I'll buy you a beer. Is that a deal?
Great.
How do folks get a hold of you? If they need to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
The easiest way is my email address, tom.marin@, and then it's marketcues.com.
Great. Well, Tom, I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking time to talk to an old friend here in Orlando. So we will keep in touch, and thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me, Jerry. It's great talking to you.
You betcha. We'll be right back.
If you have a business question that you would like to have answered, or if you would like to suggest a topic for discussion, we would love to hear from you. Just email Jerry at hello@nationalec.org. That is hello@nationalec.org.
You're listening to Everybody's Business, a podcast from the National Entrepreneur Center. Fascinating conversation with Mr. Marin.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting to be in his business.
You know, that market research piece is fascinating because when you get that piece right and you know what your market wants and the value, I think that is critical to growing a sustainable business.
Mm-hmm. Know the value in your product, but in yourself as well.
Right. And his idea on rethink, you know, and so going through this shutdown, the pandemic, all of that, I think lots of people are rethinking their business, whether they recognize it or not, to say, what is it that I do well? Where do I go from here? And so even here at the Entrepreneur Center, we've had to rethink how we went about doing business. So very timely conversation today.
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, even just listening for myself, there's little things that you can just hear and you're just like, this makes sense. I need to just reevaluate, because we all need to take that moment to just reevaluate what's our purpose and what are we trying to accomplish? And then, of course, what Tom said, just rethink how you're going to do it.
Right. Well, and you also heard a new way to drink espresso.
Oh, yes. I think that I wrote that down because I was just like, you drink it cold?
Exactly. There is always a different way to enjoy espresso, right?
I guess so.
Just
I don't know.
not too many.
Yeah, I'm going to have to try it, but I think I'll have to know my limits.
That's right. That's right. And that's true with everything in business. Know your limits. Thank you for listening. We're glad that you're listening. We're glad that you're connected here to the National Entrepreneur Center. But you need to connect with those business support organizations wherever you live that can help you grow your business. Small Business Development Center, SCORE, anyone who is dedicated like that to helping you grow your business. And most of those services are free. So be in business for yourself, not by yourself. We'll see you next time.